Welcome back. Thank you again for joining us for our Spotlight on Tomah. I'm your host, Chris Hanson. With me today is John Rusch. John's the incumbent mayor of Tomah. Welcome to the show, John.
Thanks, Chris. Good to see you again.
Well, thanks for coming. I appreciate it. We're going to start. We're going to go right off into the questions. Tell us about your political and leadership experience to this point.
Well, political goes back. I was on city council for 10 years in 2 different districts. We moved. Tomah lived out in Leavenworth area, which is out by the VA, and ran for council and got on and liked it. And then when we moved, I ran again in different districts. So 10 years on city council, and then 1986 I ran for mayor, and there was, I believe, 6 of us that ran, and so made it through the primary, and the 2 that made it through was myself and former mayor, Pete Bean. And so got elected and served 4 years, loved it. And at that time I had my own insurance agency, so I hired a couple people to work in the agency, and I spent probably 50, 60, 70 hours a week as mayor. And at that time I thought, so I appointed a committee of citizens to do that, and after I left office, they hired the first city administrator. So political experience since then, I was fortunate enough to be a city administrator for 9 years. Truly loved that job, and retired for about 1.5 years, and I got a call from, at that time, Mayor Ed Thompson, and Ed said, "John, you got to run for mayor." And I said, "What do you mean I got to run for mayor? You're the mayor." And he said, "Well, I'm going to run for state senate."
Sure.
And I was honored that Ed was, Ed is Ed. You're going to run for mayor. Well, pretty soon I've got all his friends and calling me, and so I ran and elected, and I've loved every day of it. So thank you, Ed, up there in heaven. As far as leadership, when we lived out in Leavenworth, I was president of the Leavenworth School PTA. I was a Cub Scout leader, was JC president, went on to be vice president of the state JCs, and thoroughly enjoyable. After that, was president of St. Mary's Parish Council and other things, and of course, all those things are fun, and if you're in an organization long enough, pretty soon you're going to be the leader, because it kind of goes through it. So am I a leader? I think I lead by example. I don't lead, and Chris, nowadays you don't lead by big stick. You lead by example, and the same with your family. So it's been fun.
Good, good. Now, what has been your biggest accomplishment for the city of Tomah up to this point?
Well, first go around, we truly at that time, to revitalize downtown. It isn't easy, because a lot of citizens have this image that every merchant is a millionaire. And so to get that through, so we hired a firm, Vanwell Associates, and it's quite amazing because they're still helping us to this day. But they did a study. It took about 1 year, and the city funded half of it, and the merchants funded the other half, and it was a beautiful study. And we had meetings sometimes twice a week, and we had them based at City Hall. We'd have sometimes up to 100 people there. Everybody was enthused, and so we had down to the concept. Well, the concept, and part of that is probably the best revitalization downtown we ever did, was called ended up called the Milwaukee Street Project, and the bump outs, it's hard enough to get across Superior Avenue, so we got the bump outs. We fought with the DOT to get trees, and but the best part of it was the plan called for a freestanding canopy starting on the north end of downtown and running all the way down to the south end. And to this day, I think it would have been beautiful because of what kind of made us into a mall. Well, it got down the point, how are we going to pay for it? Well, we created a TIF district, and when it came time for the council to vote, we had people with picket signs saying, "Don't do it, don't want to do it." So it was a tie vote. I broke the tie in favor of doing it. And again, to this day, it's probably one of the best TIFs we ever did, and proud of that. But Second go around, and part of this when I was city administrator, there's a lot of people applied for the job, and I think part of the reason I got the job is we had gone about 10 years without a movie theater. Anybody had been here, used to be here one theater. Once they closed, we'd have a movie theater. So the biggest thing I heard from the citizens, we want a movie theater.
Sure.
We want a movie theater. Well, I made a promise. You hire me as city administrator, I'll get you a movie theater. You know, I've been in sales all my life. It's probably the hardest sale I ever did in my life because I contacted all the people in the area that could probably afford to do it, even some of the cranberry growers, and some almost did it and they backed out. So then I got a hold of Marcus Theater. So Marcus came up here, scoped out the area. They said, you get us somebody to finance it, we'll manage it, but we aren't going to go whole hog because you're not big enough. So I contacted the Ho-Chunk Nation. I had some contacts, and I've got some relatives of the Ho-Chunk, and thank you, Ho-Chunk Nation. It took a year, and if you deal with the Ho-Chunk, they study everything. You start here, and you finally get up to the council. So they voted, and they voted to do it, and now we've got the Ho-Chunk Theater, which, you know, that's a $5 million assessment, and it's very well used, and it's a partnership between Marcus Theaters and the Ho-Chunk Nation, and it's the only time that Marcus Theaters have ever done that because they've never dealt with a sovereign nation. They said they wouldn't do it, but they did it. So proud of that. The other thing, and that one I did on my own, but the other things are all a team effort. When Ed was mayor, the big thing was a senior center. Our seniors were meeting out the exhibit building out to Rec Park, and it was big and cold and a little bit unfriendly. So we got the idea for a senior center. Well, it just fell into place because at that time Cooper Rusch had passed away, and they said any organization, nonprofit, that can create a place for noon meals for seniors, they were going to give this grant of approximately $350,000. So Ed and I thought, okay, we got to get this. Well, where do we put it? So I had contact that time Bob Holmes and Jay Carmichael. They owned the building where the senior center is right now. And Westland Insurance was in there, and they were on the top floor, and the bottom floor was empty. So I asked Bob if they would sell it to us. And he said, well, and I gave him the story. He said, if you can convince Jay. So then I talked to Jay, and Jay said, well, if you can convince Bob. And I said, I already did, so we got it. Well, we had enough money to buy it, and actually we got a bargain because we got $350,000. We bought it for around $275,000. Well, the night before the council was going to vote on it, they also owned where Phillips Drug Store is and where the brokerage firm is, and they're all together. And I thought, maybe we can get the whole works because that would be income for the senior center. So I called Bob and I said, would you be willing for that same price to put in Phillips and the brokerage firm? And he said, are you nuts? And I said, come on, Bob. So he said, okay, if you can convince Jay, I'll do it, because it was a partnership.
Sure.
So I got a hold of Jay, and Jay said same thing. Hey, I'm a generous guy, but you know, we're getting income off from that. What'd Bob say? I said, Bob said, if you go along, he'll go along. He said, well, let me think about it. He called me back half hour later, and he said, okay, do it.
So you were able to convert that?
Yeah, and it, did I do it alone? No. I got to give half that credit to Ed, because Ed, you know, between Ed and I, we kind of worked as a team. But to this day, Westland at that time was paying almost $2,000 rent for the upstairs, and they're paying 1/3 of all utilities. And knowing Bob and Jay, you know, when they work out a deal like Phillips is responsible for everything in that building, you know, and what kind of a deal is that? That's a great deal. So we're still getting approximately $1,400 rent from Phillips, and about $800 from the brokerage firm.
And that's going to the city?
That's going to the city, and that, for the first 10 years, the senior center, there was no tax dollars involved. There was enough money from all of these to pay all the costs of senior center. In my estimation, we've got the best senior center in the state of Wisconsin.
Well, that's good.
It's just,
and I don't want to cut you short, but we are actually almost out of time.
Okay, that's
I want to ask you one last, just a real quick one. What do you think is the most pressing issue facing the city right now?
well, this is positive. I look at this as a great positive challenge, and hopefully I'm the mayor for the next 2 years, because I believe next 2 years we're going to see more growth in the city of Tomah and the surrounding area than we've seen in the last 10, 20 years. First of all, you've got the sand mine in Tunnel City. That's $100 million that they're going to invest in that structure. And then you've got the one in Valley Junction, you've got the one possibly coming up in Sparta, you've got the two in Oakdale. And the economy is improving right now. Detroit, they can't keep up with the demand for new cars, so the spinoff from all of this, companies are looking. And there's some things, I can't tell you now, but you know, Toro is going to make some announcements probably in the next 2 or 3 weeks. They just bought a company.
Sure.
And
Sure.
There's some rumors going around, and we're pretty doggone close to getting a whole lot more industrial land. But if you just look next year, this is a positive for the Uniman. They're going to be hiring between 100 to 200 construction workers, and a lot of our motels out here already have booked X amount of rooms for all these workers. And then you've got, and we're still working on the water going out there. Well, for us to run that out there, that's going to take probably 50 construction workers. So you're going to have that. You're going to have Old Dominion next Wednesday. We're having a special planning commission meeting. That's an $8 million and 50 good paying jobs, because they told us this is going to be their regional. So they're going to be hiring diesel mechanics. Those are high demand, good paying jobs. So I think that's just a start. And so I'm looking, and this work comes in with experience, because it doesn't happen overnight. You know, we've been working on Old Dominion for like 6 years. So people think, man, you elect me next week, we're going to have all this industry. Some of this stuff goes back, but the advantage I had, especially with Old Dominion, I got on very good terms with their corporate attorney and vice president of the company, because they got so ticked for a while they weren't going to come here. So he and I had been talking sometime twice a week on the phone. So, and you know, my thing is sales. You know, and I've always told people, and that's why I was so successful when I had my insurance agency, I would never sell you, Chris, or anybody anything that I didn't have myself.
Sure, sure.
And it's same with being mayor. I'm going to tell you the truth. You may not like it, but I'm not going to lie to you. You know, some people don't like to hear, yeah, you got to put a sidewalk in, or your tree is going to come down. I'm sure I'm going to lose some votes for that. But I was upfront with people, because when I campaigned, when Ed said, go for it, and I campaigned against a very good man, Pete Peterson, and the thing I heard from people, be fair. You know, you made me put a sidewalk in 4 years ago. How come you don't have a sidewalk?
Yeah.
Well, guess what? I do have a sidewalk now. So, and that's what people wanted. They want fairness.
Well, John, we are now out of time. Thank you very much for coming out to the ground round today to talk to us. We will be right back after these messages.